Well, it's a tremendous honor to be introducing Dunya Mikhail. I've known her poetry since the Carcanet edition of The War Works Hard in 2006, and I've got all her other collections as well. She's an incredible poet, and importantly, a woman, a female voice in the arenas of war and protest. She's an Iraqi American, and she's the author of the poetry collections The War Works Hard, which was shortlisted for the International Griffin Poetry Prize. Diary of a Wave Outside the Sea was the winner of the Arab American Book Award. The Iraqi Nights was the winner of the John Frederick Nims Memorial Prize for Translation, and In Her Feminine Sign, which was chosen as one of the best 10 poetry books of 2019 by the New York Public Library. Her non-fiction book, The Beekeeper, was a finalist for the National Book Award, and her debut novel, The Bird Tattoo, was shortlisted for the International Prize for Arabic Fiction. Mikhail is a laureate of the UNESCO Sharjah Prize for Arab Culture and is a recipient of the United Nations Human Rights Award for Freedom of Writing. She currently teaches Arabic and poetry at Oakland University in Michigan. I'm going to just read Dunya's note from this wonderful book, which is absolutely entrancing and enchanting. Dunya says, at this moment, I am writing to you using a tablet, such as a computer, an iPad, or cell phone. If I were living in the time before writing, I would express my thoughts to you through clay tablets. I would draw my ideas the way my Sumerian ancestors used to do thousands of years ago. This is, in fact, exactly what I set out to do with this book. I imagined myself living during that time without an alphabet, needing to record my poetry through drawing. Never learning how to formally draw served me well in this book, as these drawings are supposed to be primitive, being in harmony with the spirit of those simple signs that communicated with the world for the first time. After all, those ancestors of mine couldn't all be artists. I like to think that many of them were ordinary people who revealed a part of themselves through the symbols they inscribed on cave walls and clay tablets. I am fascinated, Dunya says, by their codes, which are lyrical without being intentionally so. I wonder what they wanted to say when they drew an eye, a hand, a fish, or a bird, for example. Were those images representations of the objects themselves or metaphors for other things? What does a circle mean? The world or infinity, or a wheel or time? An expression of love and renewal, isolation and hope, or starting all over from zero? I practiced at least 2 layers of translation in tablets, the first from words in one language, Arabic, to another, English, and the second from words to images. Sometimes the poems seem to be written in both languages simultaneously. What I received from my ancestors are offerings of the future rather than of the past, and now it's Dunya's turn to offer them to you. And please welcome Dunya Mikhail.
Thank you, Jenny, for this wonderful introduction, and thank you for reading the note. I appreciate your time and being here on this conversation. I love your poetry as well. And thank you. Thanks for, of course, for Carcanet and for New Directions for both beautiful copies, the UK and the US. Thank you all for joining. I read two tablets, tablets 5 and tablet 6. Each one has 24 sections, and so you'll see the images with them.
Something's being generated, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are.
Light falls from her voice, and I try to catch it as the last light of the day fades. But there is no form to touch, no pain to trace. Are dreams taking their seats on the night train? She recites a list of wishes to keep him from dying. The truth lands like a kiss, sometimes like a mosquito, sometimes like a lantern. Your coffee-colored skin awakens me to the world. We have only 1 minute, and I love you. All children are poets until they stop reaching for butterflies that are not there. The moment you thought you lost me, you saw me clearly with all of my flowers, even the dried ones. If you pronounce all the letters and vowels together at once, you would hear each of their names falling drop by drop with the rain. We carved our ancestor trees into boats. The boats sailed into harbors that looked safe from afar. Trees talk to each other like old friends and don't like to be interrupted. They follow anyone who chops one of them, turning that person into a lonely branch. Is this why in Arabic we say cut from a tree when we mean having no one? The way roots hide under trees, there are secrets, faces, and wind behind the colors in Rothko's entitled canvases. Will the sea forget its waves as the caves have forgotten us? Back when there was no language, they walked until sunset, carrying red leaves like words to remember. It's true that pain is like air, available everywhere, but we each feel our pain hurts the most. So many of them died under stars that don't know their names. If she just survived with me, a flame dim in the fireplace, a day slips quietly away from the calendar, and Fairuz sings, they say love kills time, and they also say time kills love. The street vendor offers tourists necklaces with divided hearts, shells to murmur the sea's secrets in your ear, squishy balls to make you feel better, and maps of homelands you fold in your pocket as you go on your way. I'm haunted by the melody of a forgotten song, sung while two hands tied my shoelaces into a ribbon and waved me goodbye to school. If I could photocopy the moment we met, I would find it full with all the days and nights. It won't forget the faraway child, that city whose door stayed open for passers-by, tourists, and invaders. The moon is going to the other side of the world to call my loved ones. The seasons change colors, and you come and go, What color is your departure? Tablet 6. When the sun is absent, the flower misses her. And when the absence grows long, the flower looks inside herself for a different light. My flower will not wither. It's drawn in my notebook. I am the plural who walks to you in the singular. Artificial tears needed urgently for dry eyes. Natural tears leaked for centuries into the rivers and overflowed. Before you shoot someone, remember a mother's eyes will follow you wherever you go until she drowns you in her tears. They didn't like his idea, so they shot him in the head. Out of the bullet hole, his idea will unfurl like a climbing plant and spread through the world. Only one heart resides in each person, but each heart is a train full of others who die when that person is killed. There is sun inside each book. Come and bring the new day that waits for us to dawn. She asked the night, "Why are you so dark?" The night answered, "So that the starlight can reach you." She asked the day, "Why don't you light up?" The day answered, "Because I've become your shadow." Life is beautiful and painful, like a feather pulled from a wing. When the pistachios ripen, we break their shells like we break open the hearts of our lovers. If thieves come to your home, let them take everything except your dreams. Keep those in a safe box. She dreams, and her friend completes the dream. When they separate, the earth rotates more slowly and with half the dream. The trees, like us, depend on their roots in times of danger. During the pandemic, we are a forest, trees standing alone together. We watched our days. A snowman melts away as he should. There are days we wait for and they come, and there are days that happen to us which we cannot avoid. The bubbles in the aquarium are the notes from the fish about the world. Like a patient teacher, the sun brightens our wrongdoings at the same time every day. When the bird is prevented from singing, his body turns into music that fills the horizon. The birds never ask if you are going to heaven or hell, and they never divide the sky into stations. When the birds chirp in your head, trust their message, especially if they say to you, for example, flying is your true home. What if the guns turned into pencils in the hands of the soldiers so that they can circle all the places on the map as sights to see before they die?
That was absolutely
Thank
wonderful, Dunya. I'd like to hear much more. Could you explain first how I think there are 10 tablets, paper tablets, aren't there, in the book, with 24 poems in each and drawings in each one. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And thank you so much. That was a lovely reading. But I'd just like you to read them all again and just look at the pictures for longer. But how are you, by the way? Because you've been teaching all day, haven't you?
Yes, I was running from the class to here. This is not my room. I because so that to be on time, I borrowed my friend's room. This is the room of poet, another wonderful poet like you, Katie Hartsock. Her name is.
Oh,
She's American poet. She teaches here with me. I borrowed her room. Appreciate this.
but she's got a very nice picture of a deer behind you, and so that sort of seems appropriate. Nice
Yeah,
drawing.
yeah,
Um,
nice room.
yeah, so we've talked the other day quite a lot about your life and work, and a few things I've thought about it a lot. One of the things I've thought is there are very few women poets who have actually experienced war and exile as you have. How important is it, do you think, for women to make their voices heard above the louder voices of men, especially in war and protest?
Yeah, I mean, in times of war and explosions, time of violence, time of all this noise in the world, many of us are silenced. But women are silenced twice. First by that noise, and second by the louder voices of men. And I mean, this is like louder. I mean, like they always heard better in the world, and um, and nothing against something against men specifically, but this is the reality that we live in this. It's not only our Arab world is kind of patriarchal, but I feel the whole world is the same way. And so, but after that, the resilience and stories persist. They stay waiting to be heard. And these stories are important. And so women's voices bring now what we call in English uh, nuance.
Nuance, yes.
Nuance,
Yeah,
how that's how we say it, nuance
absolutely. Yes.
to the monolith of history.
Mm,
So it is, yes, it's very important for these, for the voices, all of the voices to be heard, and our stories to be heard. During the war in Iraq, we had war after war. Only men went to the war. We were lucky. The women were not. The men were by force. I mean, it was not their choice. They had to go to the war.
mm,
And I was thinking, oh, thanks God, I'm a woman because I didn't have to go to the war. I noticed something in the writing. We had, of course, poets, male poets, and we were just few female poets. And I noticed because the men were in the battle front, they were man to man. They had who they called enemy. I don't call anybody enemy, but I'm saying I noticed something in their writing. Like they had that experience of the war. They could write about in their poems. You hear uh, that experience, bullets and things like that. But the poetry of women were more dealing with the impact of war on the everyday life, on the homes,
mm,
on the streets.
mm,
So it was kind of different. The the poetry that was written by women was different. It
mm.
had that I noticed. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, women are so deeply affected by war, and yet their voices are very rarely heard. Um, I think the language you use is really interesting. If you think, I'm thinking of masculine and feminine ways of speaking, and it's difficult getting into feminism, as it were. But instead of talking about winning wars, you talk about finding ways to peace. Um,
Yes, because Jenny, I don't believe in winning in the war.
Mm,
I don't believe
mm,
in victory. Everybody lose. Everybody is lose something
mm.
in the war. Um, Somewhere in my text diary of a wave outside the sea, I say um, the so something like the killed. So the killed loses his life or her life, and the killer loses his humanity. So we all losers in this in the war always. Um, yes. Uh,
Mm.
but as speaking of femininity, you before this you were mentioning about you asked about the ta marbuta, that the feminine sign in Arabic. So
Yes.
the, it is something I don't know. I don't want to. How did like you were talk? We were talking about
Yeah.
that. So
Well,
you
yeah. So
was very interesting what you noticed.
what we were talking about the other day was a lot of poets write ekphrastic poems about art or
Mhm,
photography or from visual prompts or other sound prompts. But I don't know any others who are so inspired by typography and writing as you are. The
mhm,
way Arabic writing runs from the left, and Roman, English language writing runs from the right, from the left. Oh, sorry, the other way around. Arabic writing runs from the right, and English writing runs from the left when you're reading it on a page. And so then the two meet in the middle and almost interact with each other. Um, and it's just the sounds and the shapes of the text and the letters and the marks itself that you draw your inspiration from. And yes, talking about in her feminine sign, has at its heart the Arabic suffix ta marbuta, which is a circle with two dots above it,
mhm,
which indicates a feminine word or sign. And but you in that book you turn it into poems about the moon, a stone, um, other circular things, don't you?
mhm.
That's quite exceptional, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I love your question. My fascination with signs and codes is something to do with my fascination with poetry itself. Growing in Iraq, I was surrounded by, traces of ancient civilization. I was constantly aware of the power contained in the shapes of the world and these the codes and the even cracks between these tablets that carry history, identity, and memory across time. You know. So I'm drawn to the science and these clay tablets where every mark holds a secret message passed through the cracks of time, if we may.
Mm,
So and the clay hardens over centuries,
mm,
but it the marks that they're not just scars of age. They hold meanings of their own, I
mm,
believe.
mm,
So these cracks reveal fragility, but also resilience, just like our spirit, our human spirit. So in these imperfections, I see untold stories hidden between these lines. But
mm,
the feminine sign that you asked about, the ta marbuta, is another story. I teach Arabic language, and one day I was teaching about this feminine sign, the ta marbuta, which is a circle with two dots over it, that comes at the end of the verse to make it feminine, to mark the feminine word, because Arabic is gender oriented. Everything is either masculine or feminine. We do not have neutral. Like, for example, poetry is masculine, by the way, but poem is feminine word, just for it's if you wonder.
mm,
So this small simple mark, which this circle, when I was teaching it, I said the literal meaning of marbuta I was explaining to them that the literal meaning of it means tide. And it's even sometimes the circle is written, it is shaped like this tide,
Yeah.
evoking the image of something, something bound, it's tied.
Mm. Mm.
So as I spoke, I couldn't help but wonder. Uh, I paused there and I've thought, why is this feminine mark tied? Anyway, so does it reflect the reality of women in our society, or
Mm.
that's tied by tradition and expectation? I found something there. So um, what does it mean
Quite
for
often, yeah, quite
community to
often
be tied?
you
Yeah,
find opposite meanings, don't you? So you might find that being tied is being bound or being a prisoner, but it could also be a safety. It could be something about, you know, it's not a very
you
good
are just
example.
you are just
It's a very
I
good
think you are
example of what,
optimist.
yeah, of what you do, but you do
Yes,
make things possible.
right.
You expand. I think somewhere said, I can't remember, maybe it was an interview in the Rumpus, the American journal, talked about the immensity of your imagination that just
Right.
expands and expands and expands.
Actually, I agree with you. It's not just a symbol of limitation, it's
Mm,
also a symbol of potential.
mm,
Something, while tide, it holds within it the possibility of release, because
mhm,
the tide means after that we would look for release, we would be free of transformation, So it's an
mm,
opportunity to be free from something, or to, the um, to to think about it, and think of our freedom then, because
mm,
that comes as this is turned into opportunity.
mm.
But I don't know if it's a linguistic accident, or is it by accident is tied, or I was
Yes,
wondering, or is it a
yes.
reflection? So
Or it
that I recognizing,
might be a metaphor,
or
as you
metaphor,
suggested.
or yeah, a way to unite, untie what has
Yeah,
been what has been bound for too long.
yes. I've
Mhm.
got this now. I don't know how many questions there are in the chat, but there's one question in the Q&A which I'll ask in a minute. But I just wanted to ask one more question.
Mm.
In tablet 9, poem 13, you say, in Italian, a stanza is a room. In Arabic, a line of poetry, bait, means home.
Mhm.
Is this why I don't feel exiled? Which I think's wonderful, sort of, again, metaphor. And how do you go about transforming exile into home? And how do you live between two homelands?
Yeah, so when I say, is this why I don't feel exiled? Referring to, it's interesting for me how, the stanza, it's a room, and
Mm,
bait is a home. It's because poetry has become my room and my home. I
yeah.
live between two homelands. One is of earth, two of earth now, having hyphen Iraq and America, and one of words, one of words.
Mm,
So the act of writing is how I transform the in between
mm,
into a place I can belong to.
yes.
I don't feel belong really to art. I really, it's the belonging to the words, as if it's even stronger. I feel becoming than the homeland of earth.
And you said a wonderful thing that when you were flying between your homelands, which are Iraq and America, you feel at home as soon as you read poetry or write poetry, and that poetry is your homeland, which is
Yes,
all.
even exactly, Jenny. Even if that's in an airplane somewhere, I don't know over where, in which city.
I'm home or you're home.
Mhm.
I wonder if all the poets who are listening feel the same thing. I think they might remember that. So Royston Tester says, that was a beautiful reading, thank you. I wonder how you seek inspiration for your lovely work. I noted Farouz, for example. Did the poetry of Etel Adnan influence you or others like her?
The influences, sometimes it's hard to trace where it belongs because they come from everywhere. Everything I read, everything, even the news, the environment. I mean, there's a saying in Arabic, let me remember it. It says something like an old saying describing inspiration that as if it comes, the jinn, it's from the jinn from the top and comes on your head. So when I smiled when I saw that, I said, but it doesn't come to me this way. It comes not, it's not vertical, it's horizontal. It comes from the surrounding, not from like the sky. And so everything is an influence. It's hard to know exactly, but when I was younger, and my colleague, another poet, Adnan Sag, who is in the attendance, I think, uh, he remembers maybe when during the 80s in Baghdad, they were all telling me you should read classical poetry more and more. But I don't know why I was more influenced by translated poetry and modern poetry because it was not perfect. There was something in it raw that translated into Arabic. So I was really influenced by that. So that's why. So my language was not. It had this something in it that was not to say not perfect, but this simplicity. I love the simplicity in
Mm,
the of the language. So I was inspired by a lot of um, writers, but
mm,
um, more the translated poetry than the classical one.
mm,
I loved Ankhidwana so much, the very first poet in history, who is from Mesopotamia, from the Sumerian time.
mhm,
Not because of because how courageous she was, like to not only because I was wow, this is the first poet and she's my ancestor, but
mm.
until now I feel like something
Mm.
about her.
Do you,
Yeah, special, something special.
you feel you're channeling her?
Yes.
Good. Um, Jessica Belt says, I'm curious, what is the difference in your poet process of how you write in English or Arabic? What are the freedoms or limitations of each language?
Yeah, so Jenny, remember when you said that you were describing how Arabic goes from right to left and English goes from left to right? And in my page, they come together, so they drive me crazy because, they drive me crazy coming from here and there and my mind going this way and that way. But at the same time, it's wonderful to have to work with both at the same time because um, English actually made me more sensitive towards my first language, my Arabic, made me more like think more deeply about it. Because when I translate my own work, I um, I understand it better and I can diagnose its flaws, and as if it's a chance for me to know where are the areas that they need change or work on because they're not because in translation they're not so good, not because of the languages themselves, but because this is not clear in its origin. And it's sometimes, there are things like even in their original language, they are not, they need something
Mm,
work on them. So
mm.
I understand this better when I translate it. Um, and so there's this like democracy in the page, like I let them kind of converse with each other in a way that they don't impose too much on each other. I call that, I mentioned it is like a true lovers when they grow together in the page, the two languages. Yes.
Yes, that's lovely image. Just as you talk, lots of wonderful images are being created. And Katie Hartstock says, thank you for this wonderful reading. I wonder if Dunya could talk about composing these short poems and their relationship to brevity and approaching silence, as well as the accompanying drawings, versus the longer poems she has written for other collections. How is the poetic process different? So between the very short and the long poems, and also I love that idea as the relationship to silence. What
Yeah,
do you think?
Katie is the poet I was talking about, that this is her room.
Oh,
Thank you, Katie, for this.
thank you for your
Yeah,
question, Kate.
she's
Wonderful
a
question.
wonderful poet also.
Mm,
These, the fragmentation, because this is inspired by the clay tablets and something about those ancient clay tablets, that they were fragmented from, if we don't know from the time, is it from because of how much time passed? But this fragmentation itself is, for me, is metaphorical, is poetical. But that's on one side. On the other hand, also, this time that we're living in, how things are brief, like the instant messages. And in one of the tablets, I mentioned how these instant messages ignite revolutions. Uh, in during even in Baghdad, in Iraq, there was I think it was 2010 revolution just started by these instant messages. Somebody, texting each other, saying a message saying, we want a country, we want a homeland. So then everybody got affected, influenced by that short message, and they went to the street and they started revolution by that small message. And so these days, so just like how these instant messages can be effective, sometimes short poems, can carry meaning, and so it's inspired by that. So the traditional tablets and the Sumerian writing, kind of, they had that fragmentation, and that I try to mirror in these. Um, and I thought, like, 24. I don't know. I felt to make them 24 sections in each, because as if it felt the complete number. There are 24 hours, but for the Babylonian time, that was considered a complete number. So it is not random when I
mm,
picked it. Also, because of traditionally, that was the complete number for them,
mm,
24.
yeah,
But to say that, I never feel there is, in poetry, that everything is in progress. There's no such thing as complete. In poetry, it's always um, to be continued, always.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you send questions to Dunya, won't you? Um, I think you can put them either in the chat or the Q&A. But something that surprised me when I read your biography, autobiography, really. You haven't written an autobiography yet. Perhaps it's time you did. You've had such an interesting life. But
I have a autobiography, but I am working on. It's been a long time that I've been working on a memoir, but
mhm,
it's taking too long. I don't know. But at the same time, I'm working on. There are poems that are developing, new ones.
mm,
At the same time, working on this project that's delayed since like a long time ago, which is memoir, but not biography, but memoir.
so unlike poems, which are never really finished, autobiographies do have to be finished. But
Yeah.
I've heard about little girls wanting to grow up to be ballerinas or astronauts.
Mhm.
But you say that you wanted to grow up to be a prophet. Can you tell us about that?
Mm. Well,
How old were you when you
yeah, it's a funny
decided you
story.
wanted to be a
Maybe
prophet?
it's funny. It's funny because, I was like in middle school in Baghdad, and the teacher was asking us, "What do you want to be when, in the future?" Just like they do. And so when it was my turn, I said I wanted to be a prophet. When I said that, I didn't really mean. to become a prophet. But for me, that time, I thought prophets write influential books.
Mm,
So I meant, I think I meant I wanted to be a writer, but didn't know how to
mm,
express it. Or writer was not a word we used that time at all for
mm.
some reason. But I heard prophets, and prophets write good books. So I said prophet. I meant to write a good book.
So perhaps you should come down a mountain with tablets with a fire. So that's what prophets
And,
do.
and to be honest with you, I don't know if I should mention this, but there was a trouble with that because teacher complained to my mother saying out of all professions, Dunya said she wants to be prophet, and our prophet, Prophet Muhammad said, no prophet after me. But the way he said it in Arabic, La nabiyya ba'di, it was in masculine. But I said, yes, but he didn't say La nabiyyata ba'di, which is the female prophet. He didn't say that. So I played with the ta' marbuta without that time recognizing the ta' marbuta, because in Arabic, if you say prophet, there are two words for it, one masculine or feminine. So he did say no prophet, but the male, he didn't mention the female. So I answered, but he didn't
Ah,
say. So he said, but he didn't say that with the top.
saw your little opportunity there. Someone, Mariana Villanueva, has said, she says, I love these questions and answers, but writers are prophets. She is also a writer. So, of course, you also went on to say that in your, but wherever I found that quote from you, which I think is so lovely. You went on to say that as a poet, you feel that poetry is, in a sense, prophecy, or at least has some elements of prophecy in it. And Jessica Belt has said, even how you expressed how you wanted to be a poet and writer was poetic, just the way you speak.
Thank you, Jessica. Jessica is wonderful. Jessica, you attended. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, and here's one from our wonderful publisher, Michael Schmidt, who says, what is the difference you perceive in readerships in Iraq, where you still have readers, I assume, the USA and Europe? In fact, how are you how are you regarded as a poet in Iraq compared with Europe and the USA?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for publishing the book. Appreciate it, and thank you for the question. Yeah, poetry is very popular in Iraq. If you throw a stone, it will fall on the head of a poet, I think. It's so many poets in Iraq. And the readership there's something called ilqa, where the poem is recited. And so it's interesting to see, like, even it's different between, like, some men, especially when it's classical poetry, they read it in a way that is really recitation, similar, not similar to Quran, but it has some kind of tone in it, and sometimes a loud tone. But where you see women or modern poetry is the louder, is less loud tone.
Mm,
By
mm,
the way, I called myself when I was in Iraq, so even then I called myself the low tone poet then, because it's more different, it's modern. And well, I published early in Iraq, so
mm,
when I left, I was already published. I already had 3 books when I left, 3 poetry books when I left Iraq. But something funny, poetry is very important in Iraq, and sometimes there are high expectations from poets, as if they're because there are wars and there are troubles and this, and they expect from the poets always to say everything as if they have to be the mouth of the society. But something funny, a friend of mine, when he heard I am going to America, uh, it was war, and it was risk, and you may lose your life anywhere in the explosion or by accident or anything. And I was my writing was kind of what is called subversive. And this poet, this person who was not worried about that I'm leaving Iraq, going to America, his worry was, he said, "Oh, but how you gonna go to America? But poetry is marginal in America." So that was his worry. Was not the war, not the risk, not anything. But how are you gonna handle this in
Yeah.
America
Yeah.
poetry? So that was his concern. It stayed in my mind. The other thing about readers there, I mean, I don't keep a lot of contacts, but the contacts, one of the responses was funny also, because I was using a lot of metaphors in Iraq to sometimes to hide my true meaning from censors, because censorship
Yeah.
was strong in Iraq. So I wanted to be understood by the readers, but not by the censors. So I was using a lot of metaphors, as shields.
Mhm.
Then when I came to America, maybe they were less metaphors because that censorship is not there. So a reader from Iraq, a sincere reader, he wrote to me, said, "But Dunya, you were writing better before." So he loves those metaphors. He
Yeah.
loves he loves the metaphors that I was like a lot of them in
Mm.
my maybe in my earlier poetry.
Yeah.
Here in America was not marginal as that friend was worried. Poetry I didn't feel was marginal. I mean, as much as I'm concerned, or maybe because I was lucky, I found attention more than I expected.
Mm.
And so
I
really I
think,
feel lucky I feel there is readership. I mean,
yeah. I think maybe what your friend meant was that poetry isn't so embedded in the community as it is in Iraq. And also
right.
in Russia, when I've been to Russia, people come from with their shopping bags, who've just done their
Mhm.
weekly shop, and they'll come 100 people to a little hall somewhere and sit
Yes,
and listen to poetry. And
yes.
it's like the Irish with their music, they play their music in their kitchens. It's not something to be
Mhm.
only
Mhm.
spoken in at readings, and
Right,
yeah,
exactly. It's different.
it transfuses life and through life. So
Right. In
is that
Iraq is different.
is that more the state in Iraq, that ordinary people who don't, who aren't sort of haven't done creative writing
Mhm. Oh,
degrees,
creative
PhD?
writing. We don't have creative writings. People think you are born with it. They don't feel like you need to be trained, but I feel like why not? It's good. These MFA, I love them because even if you are already talented or you don't need training, but
Mm.
isn't it always useful and fun to be with other people who share with you this love for poetry, and you read together and have feedback and all that. So it's a good idea, but we don't have MFAs. But the thing is, poetry really is different as part of everyday life in Iraq. Like here, more like you go to a reading like this
Mm.
to listen to poetry, but in Iraq, it's part of the air and everything.
Yeah.
Because people, when they are sad, they say poems. When they are happy, they say poems.
Mm.
When like I remember, like one of the very first my experiences with poetry was when my father died. My
Mm.
father died, he was so young, I was young. And during the funeral, just like the way it's in Iraq, a woman came to read poem on this occasion.
Mm.
And it was not a strong poem, but I felt something. I felt how this poem distracted me from my sadness
Yeah.
because art,
Mm.
because my attention was how about listening to the poem and as art, and it distracted me for a moment from my
Mm.
sadness.
Yes.
I paid attention that how, wow, that poetry can distract
Yeah.
us from our grief.
Yes. that's it's a consolation as well, isn't it?
And if they don't do that, if you don't try say poems for the dead, is I mean, in the ancient Mesopotamian time, this tradition
Mm,
belongs to that time because people were thinking, if you don't do that, if you don't nourish the spirit of the dead with
mm,
poetry, it will haunt you,
mm,
and it will not be good for you. And if
mm,
just like how Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, and even Babylonians were burying, like with the dead, they were putting food and water
mm.
uh, to kind of, for some reason, but this and reading poetry was to nourish the spirit.
Yes.
So they put food and water, but also they read poem to nourish the spirit of the dead.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think we're going to have to finish soon. I'd love to go on talking to you all evening, but just to that point you ended on, in one of your little poems, I think it's included in tablets, uh, about giving a word to the dead to take with them into the next life. And the word you gave them was imagination.
Mm, mm.
So that's a
Yeah.
very, very beautiful idea.
Uh, let
I
me I know where is that
just
poem.
read that little poem,
It is
then we'll
you like me to
just read that.
you want
Just
me to
read
read
that
that
one,
one?
just
Yeah.
that one poem, because I think it's now 3 minutes to 8. So
It's here in tablet 9. Uh, let's see. Sorry for this, but it's here. It's tablet 9, number 2. In my old city, when someone dies, they bring a happy word with them to keep them company in the grave. War after war, the happy words were used up. I smuggled one out, imagination. Thank you.